So, speaking of trusts, now this is one thing I should have actually highlighted it in the book because I've got your book and I read it and I enjoyed it. And there was one line that got my attention. It was talking about using trusts to be able to kind of help your borrowing capacity along. So,
yeah.
Can we have a bit of a conversation about? We've got the slides up here.
So how to extend borrowing capacity? There's three ways to extend your borrowing capacity for investment properties. One is to get rid of all your personal debts and credit cards. The second one is obviously control your spending, and the third one is find a good broker who understands trusts. Now, the way that trusts works, there's a lot going on here, and I'm going to walk you through it. Okay, so starting in the top left, you start off with a trustee company. And so, for example, you might call it Trust One Proprietary Limited. Now, that trustee company's job is to hold assets on behalf of the beneficiaries. Now, the directors of a company could be us, it could be me and Kelly. In your case, could be you and Kat. The beneficiaries is also us, but it can be different. So it could be I'm the director of the trustee company, but we're both beneficiaries and vice versa.
And just a quick aside is you're talking about corporate trustees as well. So if you know it by trustee company or corporate trustees, exactly the same thing.
So you corporate trustee is you just registered a company with ASIC. It's a corporate trustee. Now there's two types of trust. There's a main types that we talk about in property. A unit trust is where the beneficiaries are named and their entitlements are fixed. So for example, I have one with my son, where 1/3 of the unit entitlement is for him and 2/3 of it is for me, or for me and Kelly. Okay?
Yeah, and you see this more particularly in like developments. You'll see a unit trust set up for a syndicate or a development, not so much the standard kind of buy and hold.
Correct. So yeah, that's typically what we might do, and it's also often when it's in non-related parties, but also there could be a land tax component, which I'll get to later.
Yes. Everyone loves the land tax. So
I did pay it once. I don't look forward to having to pay it again in the future if rules change. Now, a discretionary or family trust is where the primary beneficiaries is us. So, for example, it's me and Kelly. And the general beneficiaries is all of our families. It's parents, grandparents, children, grandchildren, brothers, sisters, and everybody's partners, and any related entities. So anybody can be a beneficiary then of that family trust. They're brilliant vehicles for long-term asset holding in general. For properties, I always want to focus on the negative first. So the first thing is they cost money to set up. Now, I can jump online and set one up I can set up a company for $600 with ASIC, and I can download a trust deed for $110 off the internet. But that's because I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, and every state has a different stamp duty as well. Be careful of that.
Correct. Yeah. Now I know what I'm doing, so I'll set them up myself. But I paid for the first one, and I would always recommend paying for the first one. Once you paid for the first one, if you can see how it works, then you can copy the format and do your own next time. But it does cost between $1,000 and $2,000 to set up. Then you've got to pay every year. ASIC at the moment, they just up their fees to $290 a year. And you've probably got somewhere between $100 and $400 in accounting fees. Some accountants would try and charge you $1,000 or more. Leave them, find another one. I am in the process of finding another accountant because they are overcharging me on one of my trusts. Now, in New South Wales and Victoria, you will pay land tax on $1 for a family trust. So if you're an individual and you buy property, you get like a $800,000 or whatever land tax allowance before you pay land tax. But if it's a trust, you get nothing. So if you're going to buy in a trust, maybe not a family trust in New South Wales or Vic.
Okay, that's good. It's good to
know.
And
then no negative gearing at all.
Yeah.
So any losses are locked in the trust and carried forward into the future.
And what about capital gains tax?
Capital gains tax, if you have to pay
discount, capital gains tax discount.
Separate things. Let's look at let's talk about the pros. That's not a con. So the capital gains tax is not a con. There is no con on capital gains tax. Okay. So I'm going to talk about the pros now. So the pros is the taxable income for family trust is allocated to the lowest income earner in each year. Now, if you happen to make a capital gain, that capital gain can be allocated. Now, if that capital gain is allocated to an individual, that individual is entitled to get the 50% CGT discount, is my understanding, but I'm not an accountant, go talk to one. Okay? But if you do make a big capital gain, then it's great to be able to allocate money to different family members. Okay?
Super useful.
Yeah. We sold a property in the States a few years back. So, yeah, it was very useful. Now, the borrowing capacity is increased with more trusts. Now, the best way I know of explaining this is to say, imagine you own a property and then you go to the bank and say, my trust would now like to get a mortgage. So I've got one mortgage in my name. The trust wants to get a mortgage. Now, the trust is the borrower. The borrower doesn't have any assets or liabilities, and the borrower is only going to get rental income. And that's not going to be enough to service the debt. And so you're going to have to go guarantor. Now, as soon as you go guarantor, any loans in your name get added in. So now the bank looks at it and says there are two mortgages on this application, which is your existing mortgage plus the new trust mortgage. That's two mortgages. Now, that would be identical for if you just put the application together and ask for a second mortgage on the new property. So if you get one trust, it works identically to if you buy it in your own name from a borrowing capacity perspective. But if you go and buy a property in one trust, and then you decide you want to buy another property, and you choose to set up a new trust for the new property, then the new trust with a corporate trustee is the borrower and has no other mortgages in its name, and you're the guarantor and you have one mortgage in your name. So now the application has two loans on it, just like the first application did, which means if you passed serviceability on the first one, you pass more serviceability on the second one, and the third one, and the fourth one, and the fifth one. And one of our clients just bought his 12th property, 9 of which he's bought this year.
And what's his income?
It's enough to service the 3 existing properties plus one more.
Okay.
1 to 2 more, actually. So his 3 existing properties plus 1 to 2 more. And all of his then extra ones are in trusts. And that's all he needs to be able to service is his 3 existing properties plus one more, plus one more, plus one more, plus one more until we get to 12.
Okay? So essentially it kind of, I don't want to say the word hides it, but as long as that trust can service itself, and how do you, I don't know. It sounds too good to be true.
Correct. So, so firstly, if you go to Commonwealth Bank with that, they're going to go, what about the debts for the other trusts? We're going to count all those as well. And Commonwealth Bank will decline the application, the second application. For most other lenders, they will say, hey, you're director of a company. Now I'm director of a company that's a business, as well as being a director of a trustee company. They're going to say to me, we want to see the tax returns for those 2 entities. And I'm going to say, well, here's the tax returns for my company, because obviously I use that income to pay my wages and to cover servicing, and also because I have to prove I'm not making a loss. But they then say, well, where's the tax returns for the trust? And I say, oh, here's a letter from my accountant to say that company is an asset holding trustee company only. The interesting thing is here, up until a few months ago, the accountants used to write a letter to say that company was not losing money. But accountants were told to stop writing those letters. So they were told, don't make assertions about the tax returns if you haven't done them yet. And even then, don't make assertions about the future because you can't guarantee it. So what they did was change the wording on the letter to say, that entity is an asset holding entity, is a trustee company for an asset holding entity, end of. And the bank says, thanks very much, tick. Now, as soon as you're borrowing in a company and buying an investment property, this loan is now no longer under the National Consumer Credit Protection Act. And therefore, you have to put on your big boy or girl pants and make your own decisions, because the banks don't have to protect you from your own stupidity of getting into too much debt.
So what are some of the considerations that given what you just mentioned there about it's not NCCP, what are the types of conversations that people should be having with themselves or with a broker about this?
Yeah, so you need to understand, how is the cash flow going to work? How's the cash flow going to work at 3% higher interest rates? How's the cash flow going to work next year when my wife goes on mat leave? How's the cash flow going to work when we go from interest only to P&I? Remember, the lenders are assessing your ability to pay the P&I repayments at 3% above the current rates. But if you're paying interest only, you're not paying that. You're paying interest rate only at today's rates. And if they get 3% higher, well, then you'll get 3% bigger tax deduction on the property anyway. So that the bank's calculators do not model reality at all. So you have to understand what reality looks like. You have to say, well, if the interest rates are 3% higher, can you at least manage the interest only payments for the next 5 years? And then we can reconsider whether you can keep it in your portfolio, or we get you a better rate of interest, or your rent's gone up in the meantime, or you've got salary rise in the meantime. That means you continue holding them for longer or get another interest only loan.
Yeah. So I think that's really important, because I saw a post the other day about somebody considering whether they should sell or whether they should keep a property. And I sort of thought, well, yeah, these are probably potentially some of the things that are happening in people's households. And I'm not saying it's widespread yet, but some people who maybe leverage a little bit.
We just refinanced one of ours. In fact, the first trust that we bought a property through in Australia. In fact, the first one we bought in Australia was about 6 years ago, and we refinanced it not long after for rate reasons. But the interest only period is about to expire, so we just applied for a new loan. Well, guess what? When that trust comes and put an application in, we have no mortgages in our name. So it's just one application, one mortgage. Can we service that mortgage at 3% above the rates P&I? Yes, we can. So can we extend the interest only period? Yes, we can. Are we over 50? Yes, we are. What's our exit strategy? Well, we've got a load of money and a load of assets, and we'll sell one of them if we want to pay our debt.
You need to, yeah. Okay, cool. So, yeah, jump in the comments, guys, if this is making sense or you have any questions around this, because I think it's it's kind of a complex topic, but you explained it incredibly well. It's super interesting because not many people talk about this.
Let's go back up to the land tax, because you get a new
that's what I wanted to go in.
Threshold in Queensland and WA for each company trustee.
Okay, well, before we go into land tax, because I think this is a massive thing and when you're talking about people selling, we're talking about people selling properties. It's like people in Queensland are scared to sell. They're thinking about selling their properties because of this new land tax threshold thing. So what we have to do is go to our next ad, and then we'll jump into how this land tax, we'll chat to that and get into it.
First home owners agreements as well.
Commercial property offers the highest cash flow in Australian property investing, offering exceptionally higher yields than residential. Now, we're talking 8 to 10% net yields. That's cash after all expenses, not this 2 to 6% gross that we see in the residential space. So for those that are starting out on their commercial investing journey, it can be exciting, but it's also a step not to be taken lightly. The expertise of a commercial buyer's agent can pay dividends to help you secure that high cash flow and high growth potential property. And this is why we recommend Steve Polisi of Polisi Property. With over 6 years experience in the space, Steve has over 1,200 property transactions under his belt. He has seen it all and knows the best locations right for growth. In a previous life, Steve was a chartered mechanical and structural engineer, so he draws on his mathematical and analytical skills that he's developed to break down what works best in commercial property. As with engineering, same goes with commercial property. It's based primarily on the numbers. So if you're curious about diversifying into commercial property, you have access to $100,000 in cash or in equity, book a call with Steve today and find that perfect asset for you.
We are speaking about good old assets and land tax and first home owners grants. So there's so much. Is Joe? Oh, he's back. Here we go.
I love that ad for Steve stuff, by the way. I think Steve's fantastic.
Yeah.
My wife's keen to get to know Steve because she's keen to make our next one a commercial venture.
Oh, you haven't purchased commercial yet?
Oh no, I have. But
you want
the next one, the next purchase. Yeah.
I was going to say . So let's talk land tax and first home owners grants, because there was two separate things I know. But Joe,
two separate things.
they're just related under this topic. So firstly, land tax. So as I said, you get new land tax threshold for each trust, each company trustee in Queensland. So
do you want us to bring the slides up, Max, or are you just talking off?
I can't bring the slides up. That's Joe's job. I'm still talking.
We can both do it.
Do you want the slides?
I'm still talking the same slide, but we're blocking the bottom of it. So can we get ourselves? That's it. Yeah. So I first got hit with the only time I've paid land tax was when I bought a second property in the same trust that I bought my first property in Queensland. I got one on the Sunshine Coast. I bought a place in Brizzy, and I suddenly got hit with a $5,000 land tax bill, and I went, oh shit. And so what I did instead was I created a new trust. In fact, I created 2 new trusts because the property I bought was a subdividable block. So I bought a house, split the block into 2, and then I sold each block to 2 different trusts. And so now I've got 3 trusts in Queensland, each of which gets, as an individual, I'd get $600,000 worth of land tax allowance. As a company, it's $350 per trust. But that means we've got like 350, 350, 350. That's $1 million worth of allowance. Guess what our land tax bill is at the moment? Guess what it's going to be after the changes?
Unless the land value increase. Oh, yeah, even that.
Yeah. Can you explain? Can you explain what the land tax, what this new land tax thing is that's going on in Queensland?
So look, unfortunately, what they've decided to do is, if you just live in Queensland and you've got a home in Queensland, you've got 2 investment properties in Queensland, and they've got a land value of, $400,000 each. That's $800,000 total. The threshold is $600. They're going to make you pay tax on $200,000. So if you live in Queensland, both properties in Queensland, you're going to pay land tax on the $200,000 excess at 1.5% or whatever the rate is. It's going to be about $6,000 or something. I can't remember the actual rate. Now, what they've decided to do is say, well, that's fair because you live in Queensland, you got your property in Queensland. But what about someone who's from down south, who's got their home and their first property in Sydney and now wants to buy in Queensland? And so they've got $400,000 worth of land in Sydney and $400,000 worth of land in Queensland. And they're saying, oh, I'm underneath the $600,000 tax threshold. I'm not paying the Queensland government any money. And they're going, well, that's not really fair on our lovely Queenslanders who actually vote for us. And it seems to be overly generous towards those people in New South Wales who don't vote for us. So they're saying, right, well, now what we're going to do is we're going to add the value of the 2 together. In this case, $800,000. They're going to say, right, well, now you're over the threshold by $200,000. So we're going to tax your Queensland property, $200,000 of it, by 1.5% or whatever the figure is. So you'll still pay some land tax on that property, the same as if you'd owned that property in Queensland.
Yeah. So we did a little breakdown and I popped it up here on our newsletter that'll go into a little bit more details about that. There's also a land tax calculator on there that's super useful. But why all the property investors are upset, because it's kind of like double dipping.
Except it's not. It's single dipping. It's just that we want a double dip. We want a double dip on our threshold. I want the New South Wales threshold and the Queensland threshold and the WA threshold.
But then but no other state does this. So if they do it, then New South Wales is going to do it, and then WA is going to do it, and then we're going to have to pay.
Well, at the moment, Dom's winning some political points on it until he'll win some points, and then be like, oh, actually, it's not a bad idea. Maybe we should consider it. So, and then people. It's just
all the state governments are looking for revenue. They've got their dumbest source of revenue is stamp duty. Stamp duty makes no sense at all. It was originally designed as a wealth tax, and then they didn't move the thresholds for 40 years.
Well, Dom's just ventured in getting re-elected, so I don't know whether he might stop it, but I don't. Yeah, I'm fairly apolitical, but yeah, it's an easy win.
I'm not apolitical, and I'm not a supporter of Dom either.
Oh, there you go.
It's out there.
So
So essentially, essentially, as an individual, so what we're kind of saying here is, as an individual, if you own 5 properties, you want to buy 5 properties in Queensland, you're going to go above your individual threshold.
Correct.
And you're going to get charged you're going to get charged land tax on them up to the value of the land over the threshold that we outline in the thing, and have a look on the government, blah blah blah. Use our calculator. Actually, it'll give you a kind of loose idea.
I put the video we did with Jeremy as well, Joe.
What you can do is separate these into individual trusts, and the trusts are different entities, and then they have a different land tax threshold. So they then get their own. They get, what was it? What's the?
It was 350,000. So 600,000 as an individual, 350 as a company. Yep. But more importantly, if my company that I set up to buy property within Queensland doesn't own any property in any other state, I still stay under the threshold.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where the rest of that property is.
No, well, it doesn't. It matters. So if that same trust, so I just bought a couple of properties in WA, for example. So if those properties had been in the same trust as where I own my Queensland properties, then they would get added in to see if my Queensland trust
has to be separate from.
Because I set up 2 new trusts to own my WA properties, then they're separate legal entities. They can't add up all my entities, or at the moment there's no plan to.
Yep, they can't. They can't untank. Like, you own.
Well, they can't, but at this stage they can't.
Not. Whereas New South Wales do. The New South Wales say, hey, if you own properties in multiple trusts, well, we're going to tax all of it in New South Wales.
I think South Australia is the same, are they?
Yeah, I think they are. I'm not certain, because one of my clients got some. I thought the accountant. I said, talk to your accountant, and I thought their accountant should have advised them against setting up a trust, and their accountant advised them to set up a trust based on land tax. So
would have been a reason,
I hope it wasn't just purely for fees, but that's the risk. So I'm not certain, and I don't own property in South Australia, nor do I plan to. But that's a
controversial opinion there with Joe. Joe's practically the mayor of Adelaide. How do you feel about that, Joe? You okay with Max?
There's amazing investment opportunities in Adelaide that I am continuing to buy. So I've got.
I'm sure there is. There's amazing opportunities everywhere. It's about understanding how the land tax works and having a grown-up conversation with your accountant. So you can set up a unit trust to buy in New South Wales, and then your unit entitlement gets whatever your share of the land is, gets added to your personal land tax threshold. So if you buy a $400,000 block of land if you've already got $800,000 worth of land in New South Wales, if you've got $400,000 worth of land in New South Wales, and then you buy another block of $400,000 worth of land through a unit trust, then they know that is yours. You're entitled to get the benefit of that. So they will add that to your personal threshold and say 400 plus 400 is under the threshold, no land tax to pay.
Can a unit trust have a beneficiary of a corporate trustee, where they get the benefit of?
They won't count it. They'll only count the individual beneficiaries. So if I was an individual beneficiary, then they would count that towards my threshold. But as a discretionary trust, they don't know who's going to get the benefit, so they go, no, $400,000 worth you're going to pay. Yes,
here's a good little
it's up to you. Like I say, the client of ours that's bought 9 properties this year, he's used, I think, 5 or 6 trusts. So it depends on the land tax thresholds. It depends on the costs to set them up and manage them, and it depends on how it's going to impact your borrowing capacity. So this is a conversation that we've been having with as an accountant each purchase to say, any solution for existing that's on Queensland. Unfortunately, a lot of people say, can I transfer a property into a trust? You can.
You got stamp duty and capital gains tax, potentially.
You pay full stamp duty and capital gains tax on that. But some accountants are still saying that it's worth doing the maths to find out if it's a solution that's worth going for.
Yeah, isn't that something you went down the line of at some stage, or am I thinking of someone else?
No, I did. I haven't. I've gone through that with a client. I've transferred it, as I said before, when I had one trust that owned the block of land, and I got split into 2. I got 2 new trusts, and I had to pay stamp duty again. Whereas I could have set up 1 new trust and kept one, but it cost me $9,000 in stamp duty to transfer the land, and it saves me $5,000 a year. So far, I'm ahead.
Sorry, I couldn't help myself. I had to bring it up. I wonder if Todd's watching tonight. Joe Torres kind of claimed you Adelaide's king. Is Todd the king of Adelaide?
Now I just want to get back to first home buyers, because
Yes.
Some young guys in the office, I'm an old grey-haired man, but I do love coaching young people and working with young people. And so one of the guys in the office, Christian, sometimes you'll see him jumping up on the comments in the Facebook group. He bought his first investment property while he was still at university at age 21. But because he could see the opportunities in Queensland at the time. It was like, we got to buy. We've just got to be buying. The property's so well valued. It's poised for growth. And so he actually set up a brand new family trust to buy his very first property.
So I'll give you a bit of a background on my story. Is when I was going to buy my first investment property, I wanted to go down the investment property, and I couldn't afford where I wanted to live. I wanted to do the whole rent vesting thing because I couldn't afford it. But I was in a dilemma because I was worried that I would give up my first home owner's grant, where I would get I don't know, I think it was like 40 grand discounted stamp duty, and I would be able to get my homeowner's grant, buy an investment property in an individual name. I throw that opportunity away because I already own the rights to a property in my individual name. That was the dilemma I had. And it sounds like I went down one path to buy a property in my individual name. But what you're saying is you're the Christian.
Well, we both did though, Joe. We both bought in Queensland, and roughly around the same price, different areas slightly. But
same with same with the young Sam and Christian. They both bought in trusts. They bought their first property in trusts, but also because there was two reasons. One is that there were single guys that thought one day they might want to buy a place down here in Sydney, and at the same time, single guys that are ambitious that believe their income would go up and up and up. Now, if you buy a property which you believe is going to be cash positive long term, and you buy it in your name, then you have to declare that income forever until you sell it. Whereas once it's in a trust, if you're with a partner who doesn't earn as much income or takes mat leave or whatever, and I don't want people watching to think this is a boys' club and we just happen to be mentioning guys. We say the same thing to women who are the main breadwinner and stuff in the household, but it's income and it's a long-term thing. And you've got to think long-term with property. You can't just think, oh, I'm going to buy it in my name because I got the biggest income, so I get the negative gearing. It's like, yeah, but how long does that last before the rents exceed the value of the property? And now it's positively geared, and now the highest income earner's got the highest positive geared property. That was short-sighted, wasn't it?
Well, I think we just kind of skipped over the true value of what you were talking about there, because I thought the only way was to buy a property, my first property as a PPOR, and claim the first home buyer's grant. But when I go ahead and bought my first property, I gave up the right. So I now no longer, as a PPOR holder, can buy and get a first home buyer grant discount. But what you're saying in New South, yeah, obviously in the state that I'm buying my PPOR.
It varies by state, but yeah, basically in
tell me how it works.
Yeah, so certainly in New South Wales, we actually weren't sure about this. So the question is, would Sam and Christian still be able to get first home buyer benefits of stamp duty concessions and so on in New South Wales if they later bought property in their own name? And we weren't sure, so we rang up the OSR and asked them, the Office of State Revenue, and they said, of course, unless the property's in your name, then you're not disqualified. You only have to, the best way of checking is the forms. What do the forms say? You don't want to lie on a form, it's called fraud. But if you tell the truth on a form, it says, do you own any property? And the answer is no, I don't own any property. That company does. And they're not to know whether that company is your company or another company or who's the beneficiary. The beneficiary is other family members. It doesn't matter. The fact is they'll still let you buy a home in your own state if that's what you want to do. But in some states, buying that investment property, in some states, buying an investment property doesn't disqualify you from the first home buyer's benefits at all. So in some states, and in New South Wales,
that's why I said it, Joe. Yeah.
In New South Wales, when I first started as a broker, you could buy an investment property anywhere in the country, including New South Wales, and still get the first home buyer benefits. So they changed the rules in 2010 or something, around 2010-ish. That's when they changed the rules and said, no, any type of property that you bought before disqualifies you from first home buyers. But if it's in a trust, then you can still get it. So you've got to look at this. You've got to, look at your own state and check the rules. And I'm not going to pretend that I know them because I haven't.
Yeah, they're very they change so regularly as well. And the thing about that is as well, even if your partner hasn't bought a property, because they're automatically disqualified as well.
Yeah, correct.
Oh, in New South Wales, at least.
Even if you're not married, then the only opportunity you've got is before you move in together to get your separate first home buyers. So I've got a few people doing that at the moment, but it's like I've got other couples that are going, oh no, I've got one in my name, and now he wants to buy one in his. Like, okay, do you live together?
That way.
Yes.
Yeah. Move
How
out.
long? 3 months. It's like, well, it's not going to work then, is it? Well, unless you lie on a form, and lying on a form is called fraud.
Yeah. There you go.
That's super interesting. I thought that was one of the biggest things for me. I was like, gosh, I've messed this opportunity up. So if that's helped anyone thinking about it, have a chat with the Office of State Revenue and
was I not supposed to bring this up? Sorry, Max.
Great. That's all right. No, that's because I don't know what time we're supposed to go to, because I can talk about this shit forever because I love it. But I want to share this with you, which is that how to invest in a flat or declining market. Because it is something. We've just settled on a property just recently. We're still looking. My son is investing at the moment. He's still looking. We've got lots of clients still looking. And it comes back down to what I said in the beginning. Is the second way to create wealth is create value that others will pay for. And this is an example of the property that we bought. One of the properties we bought earlier this year in WA, where we bought this block in the middle. And you can see what they've done in the blocks around. And what I love is this block next door. So there is a precedent already. We know the planning permission is there. We check the measurements and the boundary. When I was looking at the property via Zoom, I made them step over and look over the fence and see where the fence line was across here, and where it lined up with this bit here, to see, can we fit another house on the back? And the answer is yes, we can. We know that we can get planning permission to do it. This property cost us $490,000. We renovated the front house because we don't have to knock it down. We could knock it down and build 3 like these guys have done. But when you look at the cost of doing that and the benefits, it's marginal at best. And I'm a big, I'm a conservationist at heart. I'm a big greenie. And so as far as I'm concerned, knocking down a house is not a great thing to do if it's still got good bones. And this
what would the build cost be roughly, Max?
Oh yeah. For the one on the back, I've been told somewhere around about the 250 to 280 mark.
It's not too bad
in this area. You're not getting a huge house on there, but it's to build something on the back here is somewhere around about 250, 280. Might have been about 200 to 220 before all the price hikes.
This is awesome because you have multiple exit strategies here. Like if you want to just subdivide the land and sell the land, like you're in a pickle for whatever reason, you're not stuck. One, you've already added value with the renovation, so you've got instant equity there. You've then got the land subdivision, which you can go down the route of and then sell the land, or sell the front house, keep the land, or you can build a house on the back and sell the front house, keep the back house, sell the back house, keep the front house. It's the ultimate strategy. And
the other thing is we're not locked into a time frame here. We don't have to build on the back this year. We'd have to build on the back next year. So if the building materials is a bit crazy, we can just leave it as it is for a while. It rents fine. One of the things I regret doing when we built in Brizzy was we knocked down a house to split into 2 blocks, but the build wasn't lined up ready to go. And so consequently, we kicked out a tenant, 80 years old. They'd been in the same house for 35 years. They asked, could they stay? And we didn't know this when we signed the contract to buy. So we just said, no, I'm sorry, but we're knocking it down. And we kicked them out. But by the time we took control of the property and the build started, they could have stayed in that house for probably about another 8 months. And we lost out on 8 months worth of rental receipts just because we didn't time everything properly. And they lost out on
I thought that was going to go the other way. Where
I don't know. We could have done.
This person lost a house and had to go and find somewhere else to live. But
I know. So I felt really bad about it. The problem is we'd already locked into doing it, and that was we did our due diligence. But one of our steps wasn't how old are the tenants. If it wasn't on the checklist, are the tenants people that you're going to feel bad about kicking out of their home? It wasn't on the checklist. So whereas this one, we're going, you know what? We're renovating the house. We're getting it rented immediately. We've got a tenant in there. They've signed a 2-year lease, because that's what we normally look for anyway. And then we can build on the back whenever we want. But the lease that they've signed says that they're aware that a building might go on the back.
Yeah, and this is a strategy that I employ a lot of the clients that I work with. And one of the things that I always get kind of talk about it, that they say, like, I don't know how to be a developer right now. But you don't need to be a developer right now. You just need to build your portfolio of properties that can have extra value. Like, don't buy the end product. Like, what I hear is people buy next door. You see the 1, 2, and 3 properties next door.
Yeah.
That is already at its highest and best use. That is as far as you can go. You're just going to sit on that and get cash flow. There's no extra value add that you're going to get out of that.
Wait for the market to move, and if the market moves the wrong way, you're in trouble. Yeah. But yeah, so I've got a client actually who's, I'm just going through now. They bought a place 6 years ago. It was their first investment property 6 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now,
I'm sitting on these.
Now they're ready to do it. And they're going, oh, we need to start looking at builds and stuff. Now they're ready. But for 6 years, it's just been sitting there rented. It's fine. It wasn't the best rental yield in the world.
I think the only thing I'll point out, and we've heard it with previous kind of developers and sort of people that have, and interested in your thoughts, you may disagree, Max and Joe, I'm not sure what you may probably disagree with anyway, is risk in potentially the council regs changing. Is if you say, yes, I may be able to develop this, and then council says, well, hang on a minute, I'm going to increase the minimum lot size, and then next minute you can't actually develop. So that's the only kind of, I'm not saying, it's risk in any investment. So, but have you ever seen that, Max, where you've had an intention to develop and you said, oh, sit on it for free?
Yes, so I actually looked at, not a personal one, but there was a property I was really keen on up in Brisbane a few years back when I was actively looking up there. And it had planning permission to knock down the house and put up 4 townhouses. It had planning permission approved. Just lapsed. And in the time when it lapsed, they designated the area as a conservation area, like a, what do they call it? Like its architectural significance.
Heritage.
Exactly right. That kind of thing. They didn't call it character. It was, I don't know, it was something, home of character.
Something like that.
It was an ugly as dog shit house, and it wasn't anywhere near the character of the other properties in the area. And next door was a load of townhouses. Next door on one side was a townhouse. Next door on the other side was a beautiful old house. And this was the dog ugly house that was kind of, you could have drawn the boundaries just one over. You'd already approved the bloody thing anyway as a development. If they'd have done it, it would be gone. So it can't have been not that decent to begin with. So and I was really annoyed about that because I looked at it, oh geez, that'd be fantastic. Put up 4 townhouses on one lot.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's such a great point, Jeff. The risk inside of it, like for me as well. One of my concerns is oversupply of this product. Like I have my property, we've talked about it in Norlane, which is this type of product, but everywhere has one of these little buggers floating around. So now the supply of these type of properties is quite high, so the demand, there's not as much, tightness on supply and demand for it because there's so many of these products out there. So you got to think of that as well.
It's another reason why we love the battle axe on this one, because we get to retain the double brick character home at the front, which has this nice big front yard on it that the ones next door don't. Look, they got no gardens. So we've got a nice big garden on this one. We're going to fence off the garden, put a nice fence off the garden across to here, so that anyone with little kids or pets has got somewhere for the little kids or pets to go and run around without worrying about them, disappearing. So you've got to think about the demographics that you can attract in a property, because there's already loads of other stuff where they can't fit in.
So with a bit of a tangent question here. Are you seeing a lot of sort of people who sort of come to you for broking buying in WA at the moment, or what sort of? We've had our eye on WA. This probably 18 months we've been looking actively at WA and saying we've got to be there. It's the same as we felt like at Brisbane 3-4 years ago when we were, when me and Christian and Sam and loads of people we knew were just buying. We just buy something, do it up, do whatever. What sort of intel were you sort of, because a lot of clients or a lot of people you're speaking to were saying you're seeing good sentiment on the ground, or you're looking at data? What do you?
Look, my background, I've got a degree in economics, which we didn't cover at the beginning. And so my background is I want to know what the fundamentals are for that area. And so when you've got an area like Brisbane or Brisbane or Perth, which is historically always grown by around 2% a year, the population grows by 2% a year. That's going to put pressure long-term on housing supply, depending on how quickly you extend boundaries. But at the same time, they're markets that behave in funny ways. So Brisbane, for example, if you look historically, Brisbane's tend to shoot up and then go flat. And then it will shoot up and go flat. And when you've seen a market do that several times, and then you see it's flat for ages, and you see the value that you can buy, the rental yield that you can buy in that area compared to what you might get somewhere else, you just have to go, well, sooner or later, it's got to make sense to do it. And by the way, if we can also buy something where we know we can force some value on it anyway, then we're pretty much, onto a winner. And so what we've seen in Perth, for example, Perth's a bit more unusual because it had this huge run up to 2014 and then absolutely died in the arse. So in this particular area that we bought here, property prices now, after going up for the last 12 months, still only up to 2014 levels.
Okay. And some people would say that that's, a scary thing. Like, it hasn't moved in 10 years.
Correct.
I don't want it. It's too scared.
Yeah, but the reason I was able to get kind of out of the rat race or be in that position so quickly after I started investing is because I sunk a load of money into the American market after they'd had a 75% drop in prices.
Yeah.
But I only bought in an area which had consistent 2% population growth, and therefore I knew that sooner or later, whatever had happened in the housing market had to correct, and we got land costing next to nothing. We were paying below cost for the land and getting the buildings for free in the States. That's, when we were buying. And that's, to a certain extent, what happened in Brisbane as well. We paid less for a house with land than the 2 blocks of land were worth when we knocked the house down.
Yeah.
That's crazy. We got a question. Well, not a question.
This is Hayden. Good old Hayden. He's a bit of a...
Yeah, you to a certain extent, you have to. It's not that you have to have an active strategy. It's just that you have to have an idea that you could have an active strategy in the future. And that's one of the things that we skimmed over. One of my big things, my big focuses as a company is we always ask people about your long-term goals. And I want to know if you're going to get married, if you're going to have kids, when are the kids starting school, when are they going to be teenagers, what sort of house do you need to live in, where do you want to live, all that sort of stuff. Because just because you're not an active investor today doesn't mean to say you don't want to be an active investor in the future when your life stage has changed. So someone with 2 little kids running around, they can't be an active investor. It's hard. It's really hard. Running a household, running a family with 2 kids, mine are grown up. I can do that sort of stuff now. But yours will grow up too. And so it's, when your circumstances change, as soon as you map out the way your household circumstances are going to change, it's easy to see how your attitude to investing could change.
Yeah, you're giving yourself the opportunity to be able to do that.
Correct.
Otherwise, you're just buying and hoping, right?
Next door based on the yield, but place next door's got a better yield.
Yeah,
should we bring up the question from? There's a question. Oh, work is work, yet we all work.
It's a good point though. But like that is work is work, yet we all work. Like that's such a great point. Like, well, what are you gonna do? Like you do have to work and you do have to do these things, but do you want the result or do you not want the result? Like, are you going to work for it?
To me, I say if I'm enjoying something that I don't really consider as much work, it is technically still work, but yeah.
Well, and that's when 8 years ago when my wife and I had to make the decision, we don't need to work for a living if we don't want to. So what do we want to do with ourselves? My wife went, I'm out. She lasted 1 day of
go and
training.
shop. Can we shop?
And that's it. Go shopping, whatever. Whereas for me, what am I going to do? if I can invest in property, if I can help other people, I love to help coach and guide other people to do what they want to do, help them get where they want to go. If they smash the pants off me financially, I could not be happier. If I've had an influence in someone doing that, that'd be brilliant. One of my, actually, I should come back to actually my favorite quote, which I didn't go for the quote of the day. My favorite quote is Joseph Heller. And Joseph Heller is the author of Catch-22, famous book, sold millions of copies worldwide, been made into a movie, been made into a TV series. And he was at a party once of what's his name? Chair. Yeah, what's his name?
I was going to say Gatsby, like the Gatsby type.
But it's the Wolf of Wall Street figure. Yeah. And he was at a party with a whole bunch of people.
Jordan Belfort.
Jordan Belfort. He said, do you know that Jordan Belfort made more in the last week than you've made in 20 years of royalties on your book? And Joseph Heller said, yeah, but I've got one thing he'll never had. And the guy went, what? He's gone, enough. And you go, if you don't know what enough is, well, then you're just always going to be.
You didn't say what I think you did, Joe. Cheeky.
It's very true. It's very true.
I'm in a comfortable, I'm in a happy position. It's not like I.
But that's because you've taken the time to step back as well and actually look at this stuff. Because not a lot of people, I think,
self-analyze somewhat. Yeah.
Yeah, people just don't actually spend that time to think. What is the thing? They just jump on the rat race wheel and just keep running.
And that's one of the questions we always ask now is, when do you want to retire? And people often say, I want to retire by the time I'm 50. Everyone in their 20s said they want to retire by 50, 45, they'll say. And I go, okay, excellent. What do you want to do when you retire? And then they'll go, oh, I want to travel. Okay. What else do you want to do? Because travel's bloody hard work. I went on a 7-week trip around the world. And it's hard work.
Around the world. God.
7 weeks, yeah.
It's not long enough.
Well, yeah, we've been
hard
before, but still, I've traveled for 14 months before, and you have to take a break from traveling, even just to sit on a beach for a couple of weeks and just go. Traveling is hard work. You've got to go to a new city, figure out where you are, figure out how things work, do the sites and everything else, and then if you just go straight to the next place, you're worn out. And most people end up saying things like they want to work in a not-for-profit. They want to do more volunteer work. They want to help other people in some way. They want to work part-time. Some of my happiest clients now that are in their 60s work 2 days a week because they go, I work 2 days and I get paid and then I get a 5-day weekend. And I love my 5-day weekend. And then I get to go to work.
Sounds all right to me. Joe, I'll have to talk to Joe about that after the show. See if I can line something up.
Yes, line it up, mate. Line it up. One thing that we didn't really touch on too much, and you guys throw any questions that you have for Max. But do we have time, Jeff? Is the question. Or the different time frames. Oh God. Okay. Oof.
Oh yeah. So this is something. This is what we do with all of our clients. This is the starting point. We always say is, and this is built into the app, is that we want to know in the short term, 1 to 2 years, medium term, 3 to 10 years, and long term, 10 to 30 years. Where do you see yourself with a family? And this is quite typical. They say, hopefully be married, maybe get a baby on the way by the end of the 2nd year. And then you go, okay, but then I've blocked out the name, so this thing's missing. So likely to go to college, and you've got an older kid who will be going to college, 2 to 3 kids, the first one in school around 2030. And then we've got high schoolers and teenagers. So once we understand the family structure, it's easier to understand where we're going to live and how that fits in. It's easier to understand what we're going to do with our investment properties, easier to think about our careers. And you'll start to see in the long term, they say they want the option of retiring by 50, probably continue part-time or part of the year and travel more. But we also want to know, do you want to travel? What are the big celebrations you've got that you want to enjoy life with? What are some of the other big things like a car that people forget about? They go, oh, I've got this much saved, but then next year they're going to spend it all on a car. Well, that's not saving then, is it?
Yeah, and I think it's important to quantify what these things are actually going to mean, because it's so easy just to say, oh, well, I can continue to save $3,000 a month and that I'll just, times that by however many years that we're going to be doing it. And that's absolutely fine. But you do need a new car. You do need to go on holidays. You do.
Yeah, that's
what
what
do you mean by that, Joe? Is you mean put a dollar value against it, quantify? I mean, it makes sense.
I prefer not to just put a dollar value on it, but actually open up a bank account, label it holidays, open up a bank account, label it car, and start putting money in for those things so that you know that that's not your future savings. It's the saving for the car. That does two things. It means that it's not future savings. You can spend it on a car or holiday. The second thing is it gives you a budget. And I love budgets because people can work to budgets. If you know you've got 20 grand available for a car because that's what you saved up, you're less likely to dip into your future savings to go buy a car.
Can we rename the budget a spending plan? Like a budget's just so, I don't know, it has that kind of word.
Oh, absolutely. That's what we call it on our app. It's a spending plan. It's not a budget.
Yeah, just such a negative connotation to budget.
I love to have a spending plan, and a spending plan can be as extravagant or as lean as you want it to be. Yeah. But you must understand that you are going to want to spend money on celebrations, on a 40th birthday or on a whatever.
Yeah, and
I think this is I think this is so powerful that and it's something that not a lot of people actually do, because you sort of you want to get to this 100K passive income from property or whatever it is, 800K passive income if you want to really shoot for the moon. And I just think, well, what happens?
Jesus, who's aiming for that?
I don't know. Inflation. You got it in today's world. But yeah, you sort of say, well, okay, what is it all for? Like when you get to that, what are you gonna and you sort of you get to it and you think and you have that kind of goal achievement hangover, so to speak, I think.
Well, and look, I'm writing another book at the moment called Spending Fast and Slow. And it's about the fact that a lot of money.
Can you write that?
Ride the waves.
Oh man,
the titles.
What
about Denny Cornerman? Is he all right with that?
Denny Cornerman, yeah. So I haven't spoken about it yet, but it's
probably okay.
Most of what we spend our money on is the stupid stuff. It's the fast food. It's the soft drinks. It's the clothes. Do you know the average Australian family spends $1,200 a year on bloody smartphones? $1,200 a year on average. On average, across all Australians, it's nuts.
I definitely, that means people must be spending a lot more, because I'm significantly bringing the average down.
Well, I'm definitely but remember, it's a household, so there's only one of you gets a phone, and you've already blown that. One of you gets a phone in years, and you're going to do that. But yeah, the thing is, we do, if we don't slow down our spending and say what we want to spend our money on. And the things that make people happy is not spending money on a new car.
Jesus.
It is spending money on a nice holiday. It is spending money on going out to dinner with friends. It's not spending money on going out to dinner or ordering food in. If you order $50 worth of food in at home, you will not have one shred of happiness from spending that money. But if you go out and spend $80 to go out to dinner with friends, you'll enjoy their company and you'll be much happier for having done it. And it's spending time with people is what makes people happiest, and going on dates with your wife, coming back to where we started from, is, my wife and I went out to listen to some live music, and I spent the whole night on the dance floor. I love music, I love singing, I love dancing, and I spent the entire night on the dance floor. She doesn't dance so much, but I was dancing with friends and other people, and I loved it. Had a great time. Went back and had a great time. That's what happens. We're married 30 years.
You like your karaoke as well. I think I've seen a video or two of you doing some karaoke.
I can sing, so I enjoy it.
I can't, but yeah, I think I can. So that's what matters.
There was no sound on that video earlier on, mate. I couldn't hear anything.
Facebook censored me. That's what's going on. It's head offices. They don't like it. So yeah, definitely like questions. We've probably got, I reckon we've got at least 5 or 10 minutes. So probably 2 or 3 questions. It can be related to mortgage sort of lending or spending or anything. People value add manufacturing. We've got one that I thought was quite interesting. Nick asked about reno versus development, but I think you and I have spoken about that enough, Joe.
It's well worth popping it up. Do you guys believe a reno adds enough value, or would you exclusively look for development potential?
I've just done both.
Yes. Tell us not to.
Well, I'm renovating. I'm renovating properties in the States and in the UK at the moment, and it all comes down to, talk to your property manager. If your property manager says you can jack the rent $100 a week, and you go, well, $100 a week, that's $5,000 a year. What's the reno going to cost me? Oh, it's going to cost you, 10 grand. Well, then is it worth that? Well, it's going to be worth that in rental yield alone over the period of a few years.
Yeah, and the equity uplift.
And equity I often see as a bonus, but at the same time, in some situations, the equity is the most important factor, which is you want to talk to real estate agents again and say, if I want this property to be worth more money, if I added a new kitchen or did a new bathroom or did the flooring, what would that add? How much value would that add to the property? What would it be worth if it was in schmicko condition? And then how can I do that at the there's two types of reno, by the way, and I got called out by this in the States. One is a reno where you want it to look good for sale, and the other one is a reno that is functionally good for a long-term tenant and for renting out for it forever.
There's three. The third one is do a dodgy enough reno that you can sell it before people know.
Put a bit of paint on it.
So unfortunately, one of my properties in America, the guy the buyer's agent that sold me also did a line in renos, and he organized the renos for me. But unfortunately, a lot of the renos had to be redone. I had to make out checks to Jesus and Jose and all these other guys at $10 an hour. All the contractors doing work, but some of it was dodgy as, but it looked great. So it was rented really well, really quickly, but then it needed redoing shortly afterwards. So it wasn't good for, I've got this is 11 years ago, I still own the properties.
And I think also, going back to Nick's question, it also depends on where you are. Like, I was talking to a friend about this. Yeah. Well, I was talking to a friend about this. He's like, when I started, I could buy in the crappiest suburb and that was it. But that's how I got started. I've now evolved. I've moved on. Am I buying in that suburb? Absolutely not. I would not recommend anyone doing it, except if that's your only choice. So if you can go ahead and make a reno and make $50,000 out of it and sell it, or that $50,000 becomes equity that's going to help you get to the next one, sell the dump in 5 years. But if it gives you the tool to be able to get to the next thing, it's well and truly worth it, I think.
Yeah, I love it. We mentioned it earlier on, Joe, that we glossed over, was the exit strategy. What is the game plan? Is it to hold it forever? Is it to exit in 6 months, 12 months, 3 years, 5 years? And if you've got multiple exit strategies and you know what you want to do, then anything's possible.
That's true. Yeah, from a sort of a property to more of a loan related. I think this is an interesting one.
Yeah, they get the same. It's the same rate. So unfortunately, there are some lenders. So for example, they won't lend to trusts. So there's some CBA lenders that.
Well, they will.
They will lend to them. They just
harder.
It's just much harder to get it through. So almost nobody bothers. But yeah, so the lenders that we use, I just did a refinance with AMP. The interest rate's identical to the one that if it was in my own name. I've got a loan with another one I did with NAB on a fixed rate. You know when those great fixed rates were around last year? Yeah, got one of those.
Not there anymore.
Yeah, I know. But we locked in when we could, and we get exactly the same interest rates. It's just if the lender's policy allows it, the interest rate's the same. But if the policy doesn't allow it, then you can't get that rate.
And it does. The lending pool does shrink a lot when it comes to trust. Like it's not like you can have access. I
wouldn't say a lot.
Yeah. Okay.
I honestly wouldn't say a lot. Every broker says we've got access to 40 lenders. We actively use 20 of those, and there's only probably 4 of those that won't lend to trusts.
It's just around the policy though, because some of them don't like they want you to be they want you to personally guarantee, or they don't like certain structures.
Guarantee it. They're all going to want that.
Yeah. Or structures in like
all going to want personal guarantees. Yeah. Okay. This was a question. Do trusts get their own first home buyers benefits or grants?
It's not a natural. Or is it a natural person?
Correct. Not a natural person. So the trustee company is the name that goes on title. By the way, we play games with this stuff as well. So my son, when he first set up a trust, a company with a trustee, I said the company's got to be registered. It's got to be a unique name with ASIC, so it's got to be, rigid edge. But the trust you can call anything you want. He said, so I can call it Batman's Secret Cave. And I said, yep. What do you want to call it? He said, Batman's Secret Cave. So he has a property that's owned as his name proprietary limited as trustees for Batman's Secret Cave. But unfortunately, Batman's Secret Cave doesn't qualify for a first home buyer's grant. But I get a chuckle every time we see the rates notice, because they actually send it to the trustees for Batman's Secret Cave. It's brilliant.
Love that. I'm going to do that. That's what I always do. I always check with clients that have a trust. I'm like, okay, have you named this something silly? And it's like, and then a lot of them have like, this one's the dog's name, and this one's the cat's name, and this is the gold.
We do have Batman's other secret cave as well, by the way, as another joint one that we own together. And that one is actually got the company name is also a bit dodged too.
Are there costs on transferring Queensland properties from individuals' names into a unit trust?
Every single state there is a stamp duty.
You're moving it from one entity to another entity, and a corporate trustee is a new legal entity, so it does mean that you have to sell
at the market rate.
Yeah.
There's a bit of leeway with typically what most of us would get like 3 valuations done. And for the stamp duty purposes, use the smallest one. And for the loan, would use the biggest one. Yeah.
And you can talk to the broker, you can talk to the agent that comes in and says, please, can you just not put a high amount on it, please? They're a little bit more lenient.
Yeah, you pay stamp duty and you pay, each state's got their own registration fees, and in Queensland the registration fees are based on the value of the property. So in New South Wales you pay a registration fee of $150 for transferring the title. In Queensland it varies by property value, so actually is a bit like a second stamp duty.
Fun times.
Well, I think we're going to pretty much wrap up here, unless there's anyone throw some more comments in there.
This is one.
Will we have a part 2?
Oh, if Max will come back on, if we haven't scared him away.
No, it's I do this for fun. I'm in this for fun. I do it for because I love it. And so, my problem is if you ask me a question, I'll answer it. I know you have what would Steve do, but there's literally what would Max do. I do it all, and I, as far as I'm concerned, I'll put myself in someone's shoes and go, if I was in your position, what would I do? That's what I do with clients every single day. And so I'll sit there and go to one client, you do not need an offset account, don't get one. And I go to another account, you're an idiot if you don't get an offset account, we're getting you one. And it will depend on the situation for that client, for their goals, for what they're doing at the time.
I was about to bring up the one in the SMSF, but I don't know whether, Well, we'll go. That's a pretty quick one. Hopefully.
I do have property. In fact, I actually paid off my SMSF loan last 2 weeks ago.
What was the reason for that? You just wanted to?
Well, actually, I didn't have a very big loan to start with, and I had paid it down quite a bit by just making extra payments. And the interest rate on it was up to about, because it's on a commercial property too, so the interest rate hit 7%. And then there's a monthly fee with the loan too. And because the mortgage amount was quite low, the monthly fee added another almost a 1% onto the interest rate. So it's like, what's 8%? If I can get a guaranteed 8% saving by paying it off, I'm going to pay it off. Okay, I could make 10%, 12%, 20% buying property elsewhere, but you can't, you're much more restricted in SMSF with what you can do. You can't borrow to build. You can't borrow to do renos or anything like that. You've got to do them with your own cash.
We'll go back to the question that I think this is a great one. You talked about withdrawing. How do you do that on a peak? This is not a straight. I mean, it is a straight.
Yeah. How do you? Yeah, you talked about withdrawing equity.
No,
how do you do that on a PPOR?
Yeah. So it can be any property at all. It's just, we talked about we did a podcast with Todd about usable equity. But if you've got a property worth $600,000 and you've got no debt, well, a bank will let you have up to 80% debt on that property. You could take $480,000, which is 80% of 600,000. Take that as a loan. There's not many lenders that will let you have that much in one go without knowing what it's for, but there are some. Or to a good broker. But you can then say, right, now I've got $480,000 as a new loan, which I put back in the loan and then use it later. Then you can use that as your deposit for the next property.
Aren't you a bit concerned? I appreciate the sort of not having an offset, because then if any money gets spent and if it's not spent straight away. But what do you, with that members equity bank, I think it was ME Bank, where they took the redraw, like, I just, I get a little spooked around that redraw kind of situation. But.
Yeah, so I'm not in the least bit. Look, I've been in this industry for 13 years, okay? Now, in 13 years, one lender once said, we're taking away your redraw. And everyone went, you can't take my redraw. And they went, all right, we're not taking away the redraw.
We need a meme about that. Let's do it.
It's you remember Jim Jeffries and the gun lobby, you know, it's just like, you can't take away my guns. And they stopped it. So they suggested they were going to do it and they stopped it. Now, somebody did say that they heard an example of a specific individual. If you don't pay your mortgage on time, they can freeze that shit. Because as far as they're concerned, they're protecting their risks. So yeah, they can do things like that. But you know, now had I been in the market for 14 years, not 13, then there were some banks that went to the wall. And so St. George went to the wall, Rams went to the wall, Bank West went to the wall.
Yeah.
Yep. They went and they got bought out by, obviously, you know, Westpac, CBA, whatever. And so potentially in that situation, maybe offset money could be at risk, but maybe redraw money could be at risk. But again, it's only at risk with that lender for that period of time. So in the example we gave before, where you pull 480 grand's worth of equity, and then the bank goes belly up and says, cancelling all the redraw, let's refinance the 480 grand to someone else.
Yeah, and just remember, in that situation, you have to still be able to be servicing that debt. You can't just say, "Oh, I'm on maternity leave. I want to get with equity out." No, you need to actually have a job.
You can't. It's not an ATM machine. You can't just sort of go to the ATM and say, "Well, I want $300,000 out." You have to be able to. In most situations, I'd say there's probably 1% where you could say, "Oh, look, maybe," but yeah, you might not want to go to some of those lenders that will lend you money because they.
If it's on your PPOR, then, which by the way is a term I loathe, a PPOR is a tax designation for a house that could be somewhere you're living now, somewhere you used to live. It could be a future investment property that you know you're living in now, and it's going to be an investment in the future. I'd hate that term, but anyway, a PPOR, you are fully protected under NCCP. They will not lend you money unless you can prove that you can afford to pay it at the full rate plus 3% P&I, even if you're getting it the current rate interest only today. And if you get an interest only loan, there's no such thing as an interest only loan in Australia. They try to define an interest only loan after the GFC. But there's no such thing as an interest only loan in Australia in the true sense. In Australia, we have 30-year mortgages. Some of them allow you to have 5 years interest only, followed by 25 years P&I. So you've got a 25-year P&I mortgage. Yeah, it is a P&I mortgage with a 5-year interest only period. I have a mortgage on a property I'm selling in the UK, which was 15 years interest only. That's it. At the end of 15 years, you've got to pay them back. There's no principal. I've got 2 other mortgages, 25 years interest only.
Yeah, the UK does some interesting things like that. When I used to deal with some expats and they had properties in the UK, and it used to really make it difficult when you were trying it. But yeah, I think I wanted to ask, because with interest rates increasing, that sort of 3% buffer that APRA has, what are your thoughts on that potentially coming down to? I mean, I'm not asking you to give us a yes or absolutely this will happen, but potentially could that come to 2.75 or 2.5 to just sort of
look? It was 2.5 a year ago. So that 3% was only instigated on the 1st of November last year, and the rate that banks were using prior to APRA saying a 2.5% rule, there was no rule prior to 2016. In 2016, APRA introduced the 2.5% rule, and prior to that, banks were using 1.5% as their internal rule. So So that when I started in the industry, it was rate plus 1.5. That's what they were charging. And for a lot of lenders, if you did a 3 or 5 year fixed rate, it would be the 3 or 5 year fixed rate plus 1.5%. It wasn't the revert rate or anything. So that could change. But what we did see was in 2016, they made the change, and they made a whole bunch of changes, which wiped out, for the average Australian, it took $200,000 off borrowing capacity in 2017. What we saw in 2016, it took another about 9 or 12 months before the market responded and started falling. And then the market in Sydney and Melbourne did fall in 2017. And then they didn't modify that until, and by the way, they set a minimum of 7% as the benchmark rate back in 2016. So it was rate plus 2.5 or a minimum 7. And they only changed in 2019. It took them 2.5 years before they made that change. I think this same change, if they're going to make it, they might make it sooner, but I can't see them making it until the Reserve Bank doesn't know what they're doing with interest rates at the moment. They've got no clue. They're guessing.
I think it's going up. That's what it looks like.
They flagged that it's going up to 3.5%, but they have no idea what's happening after that. They have no clue, and they won't get any data on that until early next year. And even then, they still won't know what to do. So, and until the Reserve Bank is clear on what they're doing, it's very hard for APRA to set a policy around what's a sensible.
Because the challenge is if they do it too soon, and then they actually RBA says, well, actually, we need to lift the cash rate to 4 to 4.5%, then all of a sudden the buffer rate starts to get pretty skinny, or can get a little bit skinny.
Potentially. So, and if they then say, well, we think it's going to head up to 4 and then going to drop down back to 2 again, they're going to go, well, shit, we better keep the buffer at 3 just in case. Or set the minimum benchmark somewhere else. So it's difficult to predict what a regulator is going to do in response to a changing market. In fact, psychological studies have shown that experts are the worst at predicting what's going to happen next. In other words, if you were to just flip a coin or throw a possible list of possible outcomes, you'll get a random answer. If you ask an expert, you'll get a worse answer than the random answer.
There we go. I think we should finish off on that.
That is a good way to finish. But Max, this has been an absolute sensational episode. I think we went very foundational at the beginning that I think a lot of people can take away from. I'm going to start implementing that into the way I run things now, and talking about trust. But how do people get in touch with you, Max? Because this is what you do.
My last slide, I think I've put it.
Hang on. Oh yeah. So Getting Your Money Shit Together is the book that's available on Amazon. It's in audio book, which is me talking. It's not some voiceover artist. Ebook and a physical copy. We do have the goal setting app. Is at app.goldenx.info. It goes through the goal setting and the money management. It's all in one app, and it'll also explain how it will quickly tell you how long it'll take you to pay off all your debts and your PPOR debt, if you want to call it that, depending on what you put in as your spending plan. So as you adjust your spending plan up and down, it will quickly tell you whether that's going to give you pay off your loan in 29.8 years or 16.4. And then of course there's the usual Facebook, WhatsApp, LinkedIn, etc.
Free access until the end of next month.
Next month, yeah. So free access for the end until the end of next month, to the app. So again, I'm all about giving value if I can, and there's an awful lot of value, and as well as lots of little explainers to explain what it all means and how to do the next step.
Yeah, and I think just do that, just for your own peace of mind. Even if you don't even need to get a loan set up, you just need to understand where your money is actually going, because it's one of the questions I've asked myself recently. Like, where is all the money going? And I like the way that you structured this is that it's more of like, it doesn't matter where the money's going, as long as you've got that fixed amount of every month, every week, you get $250 or whatever that number is. Who cares where the money goes? As long as that number doesn't change, it doesn't matter.
All of our money arguments, we used to argue every month when the credit card bill came in. My wife used to lie. My wife would buy stuff and hide it in the back of the closet. She'd go into the hairdressers and offer to pay $100 in cash and put the rest on the card, so that I saw it. When you spent $250 on a haircut, and she's thinking to herself, well, actually, it was $350. If
you only knew.
No, I don't care. I don't care. That's the money. As long as we get food on the table, everything else, it's all good.
I love
DJ.
that. Well,
Thanks,
reach out. Thank you very much, Max, for running through all of this session.
I've had a blast. It's been good fun. Thanks for the questions.
And thanks for sending me that book. I think it was probably 12 months, maybe it might even been 18 months ago now. Yeah, probably 18 months ago. And then I passed that to Joe because Joe was like, "Oh, I want to read the book too." I think so.
There we go.
Yeah.
So anyway, look, it's a few years old now, the book, but I'm writing another one. It's more about the spending side of things. There's a lot more about investing in this one than there is in the. I think the next one's purely about the spending.
So when are we expecting your second book?
I've got all the cards sitting on my desk ready to write. I should have finished it by now. I'll probably finish it in the next couple of weeks in terms of the first draft, and then it will be about 6 months. But I'm also collaborating.
Once you've got it, you can. We'd be keen to have you back on. So if you want to chat about the book, and we can, I'll read. Yeah.
And I'm collaborating as well with Todd on another book as well. So
P&P, lots of people loving it. So,
yeah. Awesome session. And thank you for all the value that you add to the group as well. I know that you are one of the, actually we have stats on here of who is the most active members, and you're always in the top 3. So thank you for doing
that. Sounds like a waste of my time, except it's not. I'm usually just answering questions in the best way I know how.
There you go, number 2. You are number 2 at the moment, just under Ian Agate.
Over the weekend. And then I won't look at anything for a while. But anyway, I love it. I love what you've done with the website. I love what you do with these sessions. I don't normally watch them because I get scared by the length of time.
Well, you definitely didn't help us with this one, did you?
Not at all.
Thank you very much, everyone. Let's go buy a property. Have a good one. We will see you next time. See you next week.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks again.